of which COVID-19 vaccine to choose. So really, it's how far up the river you want to be. So you have three ways you can do this. Yeah, you can either be all the way back, in which case you're going to send an instruction to your body to manufacture the RNA that in turn that gives an instruction to manufacture the protein that in turn creates the immune system response. That's what Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca and these other adenoviral vector vaccines are effectively doing. They give you a chimpanzee virus or something like it. It infects you, but it's been genetically engineered not to replicate. Because it's a chimp virus, not a human virus, you generally don't have an immune response to that. And that virus carries a viral payload, a DNA payload that interfaces with your DNA, and it has it manufacture some instructions to go and make this viral material that causes the immune response. And huzzah. There's been a lot of work in that line. There's an Ebola virus vaccine and so forth. But it goes all the way through the nucleus and touches your genome. But apparently it doesn't interact with your DNA other than just making something. It doesn't get stuck in there, or so they say. Okay. Those will be the most used vaccines of all the vaccines. Why? Because Johnson & Johnson is a Goliath, and their platform is single shot, one and done. And they're going to be approved here mid-February. AstraZeneca is a 2-shot platform, but they're the cheapest of all the vaccines. They sell for about $3.50 per dose, 2 shots. Then the next step in the chain is the mRNA vaccines. And that says, okay, we're going to take those instructions and we're going to put them in a piece of fat and make sure there's an adjuvant there, create an immune response. And we're going to inject you with that. And those don't touch your DNA. They just go to your cellular machinery and say, hey, go do some stuff, and it creates an immune response, and there you go. They're remarkably effective. They create incredible immune responses, like 95% effective. The Israeli data is showing it's holding at 92%, and it looks like the Africa strain is endemic in Israel from the genomic genomic surveillance that they're doing, as is the UK strain. So despite the fact that there are variants that are evading some of the immune response, the mRNA vaccines are holding up. And they are first to market because they're designed with a computer, and they're super, super simple. They also have a higher side effect profile for 2 reasons. One, they create such a strong immune response. And 2, the polyethylene glycol that's in the vaccine, that seems, because it's in a lot of consumer products, some people have strong allergic reactions. So we've seen a higher incidence of anaphylactic shock, higher incidence of just feeling shitty for a few days. However, it's still relatively rare, all things considered. And generally speaking, if your chance is 1 in 780 or to 1 in 1,000 of dying from the disease, and we're seeing a huge amount of people with long COVID, neurological symptoms, depression, heart damage, nerve damage from the disease, the fact that you're going to have a mild to moderate side effect as probably the worst outcome, it makes a lot more sense to take the vaccine. Now, fully down the river, there's the safest of the vaccines in my view, and that's what Novavax is doing. That's the protein subunit, where they say, whoa, let's not co-opt your cellular machinery or interact with your DNA. Let's just make that spike protein, and let's put it on a dummy thing that kind of looks like COVID, but it's just the protein, and inject it with an adjuvant, and then it'll create an immune system response. The hepatitis vaccines and other things follow this approach. It's incredibly safe. There's no genetic interactions, no DNA, no RNA, just goes in. Of course, it'll have some side effects, but it looks like the UK data shows that that's about 90% effective. And they have long shelf life, and you actually make these spike proteins with genetically engineered moth DNA. So, moth cells. So if I had to pick all 3 of those, probably would pick the Novavax vaccine. However, both my father and brother have been vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine because they're doctors in Wyoming. And given that we share so much similar genetic material and metabolisms, it's very likely that, given that they didn't have an issue with that, that if I was to get the Pfizer vaccine, I wouldn't have an issue either, although your mileage may vary. Now, regardless of whichever one is available, my recommendation is take it because all of them are probably safe. Over 80 million people worldwide have been vaccinated at the moment, and we have not really seen significant issues from that. And why would we? It's a respiratory virus. We're pretty good at making vaccines for respiratory viruses. People say, oh, it's a new thing. Well, is influenza a new thing? No, and every year we make a vaccine for that. And these platforms, mRNA, for example, has been studied for 3 decades. And a lot of these things are analogies to existing vaccination platforms, which have already been tested in some cases for decades in different vaccines like hepatitis or measles or Ebola, and which took quite a bit of time to bring to market. And there's no evidence of vaccine amplification. There's no evidence of any of these bizarre theories that exist. So whichever one exists, take it. The problem is we're not having an honest public health conversation. There's 2 phases to vaccination. One phase is the reduction of lethality, and then the other phase is the elimination of the disease entirely from circulation. The ship has sailed. This is an endemic disease. It's going to be with humanity likely forever. The lethality is going to decrease dramatically, and we've already seen this in Israel. 47% of their population is vaccinated. Over 75% at this rate will be vaccinated by the end of March, which means herd immunity is present. And there's a bias in that vaccination towards the at-risk groups. So mortality should fall within the next 6 weeks if the data holds by over 92%. And at that point, if it's a disease where you don't get seriously ill if you're infected, you can't spread it to people who will get seriously ill because all of the vulnerable populations have been vaccinated, there's a public policy question of why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we wearing masks? I mean, I wear them. I comply. I just got this, the Atmo Blue. How about that? Kickstarter, yay. So it's actually a mask that protects you because it's got an H13 HEPA filter inside of it. And this is significantly better than, and it has positive air pressure, so I can have a beard and wear it. And I don't have to worry about fitting it to my face or shaving. This is also $120. It's not a cheap device. Okay, so there's plenty of these things floating around. There's also a cool UV mask as well. Okay, that protects the face, but not the eyes. And if you touch that, there's a problem. And you also still have to wash your hands. There's no reason to do any of this if you have 75% of your population vaccinated, regardless of what's going on in the world. And I say, oh, but there's going to be all these variants and strains. Well, yeah, of course, there's variants and strains of influenza every year. If influenza was novel, it would have a significantly higher lethality. But it's not. And so we, as a society, as a population, have a greater degree of immunity to it. So when we get it, we're okay. Even amongst these variants, the Cushing effect from the vaccines is enough to protect you against the South Africa, UK variant. The frustration from a public health perspective is not that you're not protected and you're going to die and get seriously ill. The frustration is that we lose a property called sterilizing immunity, which it looks like we have. Sterilizing immunity is where not only are you protected from the disease, but you are also protected from infection altogether, meaning you don't spread it to other people. If you lose that property, all you're doing is vaccination is you're making asymptomatic carriers, which is actually bad from a public health perspective, good for you. So we're going to have this forever. Whatever vaccine's available, take it. It's how far up the stream you're going to be. There's 1 platform shots, 2 platform shots, enormous innovation. There's even research being done right now for vaccination pills, where you take a pill and it vaccinates you. Go figure. And there's also this traditional vaccines they're looking into, like Tonks is looking into a weakened form of COVID, and they grow it in a chicken egg, but it takes actually years to bring that to market. I think they're safe. I think they're effective. There's enormous data to that end. We've vaccinated more people with these platforms than most vaccines ever, except for big things like smallpox and polio and, measles and these things. So I don't worry too much about it, but I think we're going to live with it forever. And what's going to end up happening is COVID will get blended with the influenza shot. When you get your flu shot, you're also getting a COVID shot for those strains. And the mRNA vaccines long-term will be the end of flu and the end of COVID, because for the first time in human history, we can keep up with the mutations. Eventually, enough drift will happen that they escape vaccine efficacy and immune system efficacy. mRNA vaccines, you can, within a 6-week period, reconfigure the vaccine and create a booster shot to match whatever is circulating. So it's no longer you have to guess and use computer models. You're actually able to real time make an effective vaccine. And no, you don't have to go back through another phase 3 clinical trial. They don't do that with influenza. Anyway, I know many of you are super anti-vaxxer. They think the vaccines are poison or Bill Gates is killing the world. I see thousands of comments about this, and I always reply the same way. I just don't care what you think. I really don't, because there's overwhelming evidence and facts against you. And if you want to confirmation bias your way to a small set of data, that's a personal decision you make. And you know, as a libertarian, I just don't care. It's your thing. It's not my thing. And the reality is, out of self-interest, enough people will vaccinate for herd immunity to occur. And we will never get rid of coronaviruses. We're never going to get rid of SARS. There will be a SARS-3. There was a SARS-1, a SARS-2. They'll make a sequel. SARS-3 is coming. So this is just, it is what it is. And what I care about is the vulnerable people in society can get vaccinated if they so choose. And now we're protecting them, and they're okay. Because the vaccines are so effective, regardless if this is endemic or not, there's no evidence that those who have been vaccinated with the RNA vaccines are going to get seriously ill with the current strain. And we can keep up with mutation with just genomic surveillance. So no, we don't need this insanity of everybody wearing a mask and social distancing and society being in perpetual lockdowns. We just need to vaccinate the people over 55 and the people with a lot of comorbidities. That alone ends this. And now we're less lethal than influenza, because any of those people in the risk group will not get seriously ill. Don't believe me? Look at the Israeli data. 190,000, only 20 got sick, none got seriously ill post-vaccination after going through both rounds. We have a living example of an entire country that's nearly there, and by March we'll be there, and you can just follow along and see how long that lasts. That's what the world's going to look like by December.